Hey, I'm Bryan Fenley. This is the Honest Something podcast. I am an enthusiast when it comes to pickleball, a commentator for Tennis Channel, and my guest today is one of the most well-respected, well-known pickleball broadcasters in the game. It is Dominic Catalano. He teaches the sport. He is well invested in the community, and we are going to share his story in a unique way where we go beyond just the game, and we get to learn about him from a human level with depth and empathy. It'll be a lot of storytelling, certainly worth your time. And before we get started, if you feel so inspired, and I really hope you will be, do go subscribe. And we've got some great content out there. So without further ado, here is my chat with Dom. His voice is all over pickleball broadcasts. He is Dominic Catalano, works with MLP and USA Pickleball. If there's a marquee event, chances are his voice is behind it. And he's also a teacher in the game of pickleball. And he is going to be featured here on the Honest Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Tennis Channel. And this is a place where we're not only going to learn about Dom and what he does from a pickleball perspective, but we're going to step outside the game and learn about what he's like from a human aspect. So, Dominic, no pressure here. As someone like you who is so good under pressure, whether it's playing or broadcasting, I'm excited to share your story.
Oh, I appreciate you having me, Bryan. We go way back. We met at Nationals like 3 or 4 years ago, and everything's come full circle. So it's nice to see you again.
Well, it is fun to see how far your broadcasting career has gone. I'm a fan of it, and I think that you do such a great job. And we're going to talk about that as this conversation rolls on. But you being so invested in the pickleball community, what is that community like, unlike any other sports community?
It's a family. It really is. It's a family. The pickleball community, we talk about it being so big, yet it's still so small in the kind of understanding of other major sports. And so that's what's kind of nice about it right now, is that it's still like a family. Although it sometimes is dysfunctional, but aren't all families, at some point or another. But it's a family, and I've really come to appreciate that. Getting this kind of second chance in athletics again, coming from baseball, and now again in pickleball. Now it's just been a great thing to see, and I love that family, close knit atmosphere of the game of pickleball.
How do you feel that, and you're able to show that and display that family like feeling when you're doing a broadcast? You've developed all these relationships with the competitors, and you're able to share their stories in a unique way. How does that, from a broadcasting perspective, allow you to really tap in to how special that family is?
Well, it's kind of funny because when I got into pickleball, it's right when it started to really explode around 14, 15, 16. And at that time, Ben Johns was, 16 years old and just getting into the game. And, I was around him a lot in Naples, Florida, because his family had a place in Estero. So when he first started playing, he would be down in Florida, and I was around him a lot too. And so I've been around most of the players, whether either competing or now in the broadcast side of things, that I think me being able to have a relationship with them outside of pickleball has kind of benefited me in the production side of things, because I get to see them as real people. And they still are in that aspect of, you go to a pickleball tournament, the pros are walking around the venue still. It's not like they're secluded from everyone. So everyone gets to see them, say hi to them, get a high five, get an autograph. But my benefit is that I've been around the sport for so long that the pros that are at the top of the game now, I knew them when they were first getting started.
Wow.
And so it's kind of a unique thing, like I said, with Ben. And, I saw Annalie Waters playing her first tournament when she was 11 in Delray Beach, and I got to meet her parents, Lee and Steven, and kind of got close with them right away. Lee and I played together for her first year of pickleball. So, and then obviously she moved on to bigger and better things. But that kind of close atmosphere, close knit family and atmosphere is kind of unique to the game. And I think that me being around it from the beginning like that, where the pro aspect of it is kind of a benefit for me.
What is unique about your broadcast call?
I think there's so many different, people that I've looked at once I started doing this. I kind of got thrown into it in 2018 and 19. My first time ever doing a broadcast was at Beer City with Eddie and Webby. We're doing a live stream, and they kind of like, "Hey, you want to do this?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'll jump in." And I did it, and I loved it. And kind of what I kind of saw from that was, and went back, and Ken Herman, brought me on the APP, and I started doing that. And when I started doing that, I really found that I liked it. I liked it a lot. As a teacher and a coach, I'm able to give an aspect and an eye that some of the people at home may not see. And that's one thing that I get complimented on a lot, is that, people are learning while they're watching. And that's the biggest compliment I think I can get, is that someone at home is watching and they're learning from what they're seeing. Because as a coach, that's kind of very, very prideful for me. But along the way, I've learned so much. Got to work with Michelle McMahon and Cameron Irwin and Drew Felios and guys and ladies like that do this professionally. And I'm constantly asking them questions saying, "Hey, what do I need to do? What is it something that you're seeing?" And the biggest thing that I see is less is more. If I can give you something very quality in a good 5 to 7 seconds, I think that's very good in a broadcast. Where people get very lengthy is where I think it turns a lot of viewers off. They want to watch the pickleball, but they also want to learn a little bit too.
When you're thinking about what you're wanting to say in those small snippets, what are you trying to focus on in those small phrases that you try to squeeze in during the broadcast?
I'm trying to focus on, like, it depends on what hat I'm wearing, because a lot of times too with the broadcast, I'll be thrown into the play-by-play where I need to lead my partner in. I've working with Chad Edwards and Adam Stone and leading them in as analysts. So that's one way, and it's being short and quick. Oh, what a point there, Chad. What did you see? Boom, and let him take his 5 to 7 seconds. But then on the flip side, when I get to work with Michelle McMahon, Cameron Irwin, Drew Felios, those guys, they get to lead me in, and then I get to analyze. And I just want to kind of hit on something. Oh, what did you see? Well, you see that great cut backhand right there, puts a lot of pressure on the opponent, and that's what caused that mistake. Something short, quick, simple, but something to the point.
My guest today, of course, is Dominic Catalano. He is a well-respected and well-reputable, broadcaster and also teacher. I'm Bryan Fenley with Tennis Channel. So when you think about the way in which pickleball has given so much to you, in what ways has it been unimaginable?
From the beginning, when I first started and pickleball full time in 2013, teaching and everything, Rob and Jody Elliott with Engage gave me my first sponsorship opportunity, and I was very grateful. And it was very minimal at the time, but I was getting your basics, your paddles, your entry fees, things like that to tournaments, and I thought, that's the bee's knees right there. That's awesome. That's great. And then, moving forward, I moved on and have been with Selkirk and the Barnes family for 5 years now. And that is right there, the epitome of a family. The Barneses welcomed me with open arms, saw that I was teaching a lot and engaging a lot of players and beyond just that pro level. And so kind of getting in with that and with the Barneses, and I've been with them for 5 years now. And just that kind of goes back to that family atmosphere and what I was given with them, and the opportunities that they've given me have been incredible. And so, I thank them from the bottom of my heart for what they do for me as an instructor and a coach. And then also supporting me in, when I pivoted from playing so much a couple years ago to the broadcast booth. They didn't say, "Hey, well, you're not on court, we're not going to do anything for you." I had a conversation, an hour and a half long with Rob Barnes and saying, "Hey, you pivoted to the booth. It was a great move for you. How can we support you now in this way?" And they've done that. And I can't thank them from the bottom of my heart, like I said.
Having that support has really got to add on to being such an inspiring force behind this journey broadcasting wise. You're making the steps, you're rising the ranks. I was listening to some of your recent work, obviously at Indian Wells, and I was blown away by just the analytical brain that you have, and the way in which you're able to break things down to someone who knows the sport really well, and then there's those who don't. And you have found that middle ground where it's not like you're talking down to people who are very well versed in the sport, but at the same time, you're able to say things in a way in which those who are just learning the game can understand, which I think is a beautiful marriage there. As Dominic Catalano is with me, I'm Bryan Fenley. What does pickleball have that tennis doesn't?
The biggest difference that I see from tennis and pickleball is the camaraderie of, say, like open play, right? I think it's very difficult to go to a park and say, I want to get some open play for tennis. It doesn't really happen. You have that in pickleball where I can go to any town in the country and be like, okay, where are their pickleball courts? Okay, they're in the middle of, Iowa in a cornfield. And I could take my paddle and I can go play because I can walk up and be like, hey, I'm going to play pickleball. And there's 20, 30, 40, 50 people there. And I can walk in and I can get a game. And I think that's the biggest difference. But I don't see a negative from the differences of tennis and pickleball because most of the high-level pickleball players are coming from a tennis background. And that's what's making our professional ranks so good is we're getting these high-level athletes that come from high-level, most of them tennis backgrounds, and they're coming in and they're making a mark on the game, and that's only good for pickleball.
How is it that you can have, as you mentioned, these high-ranking players from tennis coming in, and they're very, very competitive, but at the same time, they're so down to earth? Like, in how many other sports, Dom, are you getting like the top quality athletes that are uber competitive, and at the same time, it's almost like you lose sight of how competitive they are because they're so friendly and they're able to step back? How does pickleball do that with their high echelon athletes, unlike any other sport professionally that I've ever seen?
I kind of relate it to any high level athlete. What happens with them when they're at the top of their game? The game slows down, right? And so for any high level athlete, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, the game is slower. And what I mean by that is that mentally they can slow the game down into fragments. And I think that's what happens at pickleball too. Your highest level players are at a different level because they see the game much slower than a lot of people do see that speed. And kind of how I relate that to is when the game slows down for them, they're able to relax a little bit. And I think you see that in all sports. We don't highlight it as much as we do in pickleball. In the middle of World Series games, you'll see the best players joking around, standing on second base, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's because the game is easy for them. The game is slowed down. The game has become something natural. And for these high-level pickleball players, I see that as that same way where in a gold medal match at a Indian Wells at Nationals, you have a great point, something happens, and both players on each side of the net kind of share a laugh in the middle of that. But then what happens right after that? Then it's uber focus, right back to it, and they're back to their job. And I think that's that difference of a high level, top of the game player is that the game just slows down for them mentally.
How does the broadcast slow down for you mentally?
Sometimes it's hard because when you have players who, it's funny because when you have players who like to play fast, you don't have much time in between points. So everything's very quick. So you don't want to try and get anything long-winded. You want to save your long-winded kind of rants for timeouts when we don't go to commercial, and you got a minute and you can kind of get something out, but kind of slowing that down and just being, like I said earlier, short, sweet, and to the point with things, and let people watch, right? Because that's what they want. The purists of pickleball love the sound of pickleball. It's crazy because there's so many people who don't like the sound of pickleball. But the purists who are watching it on ESPN, on CBS, on the live streams, they want to hear the point going on. They don't want to hear you talking over it. And so I try and get, my kind of rule of thumb is get done with what I'm saying by the time the team is going to return serve. And if I can shut up by then, the point's in the middle and they're good, and then people can enjoy it.
Very similar in the way in which tennis is broadcast. And I can't think of any other sports, pickleball and tennis, where the purists, as you said, advise the broadcasters to not talk during the action. It's a very rare thing in broadcasting of sports where the fans don't want you to talk when
Yeah.
play is happening on the screen, which is so unique for you and us as we maneuver these sports in pickleball and tennis as well. As a player yourself, as a broadcaster, I read this about you, Dom, that your walk-up song is the Game of Thrones theme song. How does
Yeah.
that song get you in the mood, whether it's for a highly competitive game coming up or it's you in the broadcast booth?
So the whole Game of Thrones thing, it was definitely a pickleball thing because that's when I was getting into pickleball. I'm I live by the saying in a tournament, I didn't come to make friends, I brought my own. And so the whole thing of it's me versus everybody, right? And I always, kind of translated that in my whole life. I grew up playing, all kinds of sports, but baseball is my main sport. I'll play through high school and college and beyond that. And kind of that mental focus, that kind of I'm always looking for that sound, that soothing, that almost soothing yet like I'm going to cut your throat out kind of thing where where you find that kind of that middle ground. And so that Game of Thrones is my favorite show of all time. So that kind of theme for that was always a thing for me with pickleball. But kind of back it up too, and you kind of make fun of me. You talk about like real life in baseball. I got when I was a freshman in college. The seniors got to pick your song that you came up to bat to when you were a freshman. And I didn't know what my song was my first at bat my freshman year. And I walked up and I started to walk to home plate, and the theme from The Godfather started to play as I walked up
Oh my
to home
gosh.
plate. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Now, mind you, I went to school in Kentucky in the late 90s. And so I was one of very few Italian gentlemen in the state of Kentucky. And so they were kind of mocking me a little bit, and end up that song stuck with me all my years in college. And so it's kind of funny how that all happened.
So there's a ferocity, whether you're playing pickleball or whether you're playing baseball, this fierceness that you carry with you, this competitive urge to want to do your best. Where did that become wired in your brain? How did that become wired in your brain? When did that become such a lifelong trait that is a core trait, just inherent to who you are?
My coaches growing up started with my father. He was my coach in Little League when I was a kid. And I remember 8, 7 years old, playing Little League and getting back in the car. And my dad's my coach. And I get in the car. I'm all excited. We won. I'm like, yeah, Dad, I was 3 for 4 with 2 doubles and a home run. And he'd turn and look at me and go, yeah, but what about the one at bat you didn't get? And I'm like, okay. And so we'd have to talk about that at bat and what needed to change and whatnot. And that started it at a young age. And my love for sport was just driven, and my passion for winning, kind of always. And so, that fed up through, middle school and high school. And, I played for some really good collegiate coaches. Bill Doc DeWinen was my summer coach. Scott Wiegand was my college coach. He's now the athletic director at Bellarmine University. But I played for some really tough men back in the day that were like, it's just a different era. And so that was kind of always instilled in me from a young age, but then it was just kind of driven throughout my career, where I was blessed to play for a lot of, great coaches.
It's through learning about your past that we hear why it makes so much sense that as a pickleball player, you're so tough-nosed and you're so committed to excellence because of what you went through growing up. And so as we wrap up this conversation, Dom, I think it's great that we were able to go beyond the game of pickleball, because it's then that we learn about that mentality that you've held on to. And that when you broke into the sport, like you said, when it really was becoming something that was a hit 2014, 2015, in that sort of general area, that you were in and you took that Game of Thrones mindset to it. And now look at what you've done. You are one of the faces of the sports, sponsorships, key broadcaster, excellent storyteller, and a focal point of the community that is pickleball, which is everything I could have ever imagined that I wanted to spotlight with you in this conversation. Dominic Catalano, he is a veteran, experienced pickleball broadcaster, MLP, USA Pickleball. The list goes on. I'm Bryan Fenley. Love pickleball. I would tennis channel. Dom, thanks for doing this, man. This was fun, man. It was neat to go inside of your mind and learn stories about you that I'm sure a lot of people who know you well might not have even known.
Yeah, you're right. And I appreciate you having me, Bryan, again. It's great seeing you again. I appreciate it a lot.
Awesome, Dom.